Welcome back. Now, we're going to be talking about money, but we can do this. Everything's fine, OK? Yesterday, the Taoiseach, Muireann Martin, he warned us of a new era of high energy prices. It came as energy firm Iberdrola announced that they are pulling out of Ireland, a move that will reduce competition, of course, between providers.
A lot of people are already under immense financial pressure. So business and consumer expert Daragh Cassidy is here with some explanations and lots of advice. Good morning to you, Daragh.
Good morning.
Listen, you make your living, you know, this is your bread and butter, comparing prices for people getting into banking, energy. So whenever Muireann Martin said we are heading into a rocky road, particularly with energy prices, were you surprised whenever he said that, or is this something that's just been coming?
No, it's been coming. It was nice to see him be honest, because to be honest, I think this energy crisis has been brewing for about the past 2 years. COVID started it created a lot of supply chain bottlenecks, that increased prices. But I think the government took a while to acknowledge that it was actually happening. So in many ways, it's nice to see the Taoiseach actually acknowledge it, admit it, and try to, I suppose, forewarn people that the next few years aren't going to be easy.
With an energy supplier moving out of the Irish market, is that going to have an effect, a huge effect on people, or were we oversupplied anyway?
I think we're oversupplied anyway. I mean, the electricity market is a little bit technical, but a lot of the time, usually if there's more suppliers, it'll bring prices down.
Yeah.
But in Ireland, the reason why we have such high electricity prices, because our prices are about the 4th most expensive in the EU. They're around 26% above the EU average. But actually, when you look at or when you strip out the effects of taxation, our prices are by far the most expensive. So generating electricity in Ireland is really, really expensive for various reasons.
Can we get into those reasons?
Yeah.
Because an awful lot of the time, it's just we're an island nation.
Yeah.
Tough. We get that when there's a gig going on and the tickets are double the price of what they are in the UK.
Yeah.
Also an island, or Britain, an island nation. So is that it? Or are there just super inflated profits here?
No, well, I suppose if you look at the main reasons, part of it is that we're an island nation, but also we don't have a huge indigenous supply of our own fuels. So we've no coal, we've no oil, we don't have a huge amount of gas. All of that needs to be imported. So we're very reliant on other countries for that. And then there's a cost, obviously, of getting it all here. We also have a really, really dispersed population. So there's a lot of one-off homes in Ireland. So when you're building the pylons, you're building the network, you're building the pipes to transport that electricity throughout the country, when you're then having to build those pylons just for a tiny village throughout the country, that really adds to some of the fixed costs. And those fixed costs usually add around 30% to people's bills. So before the supplier even takes anything, around 30% of your bill is going towards the actual upkeep of the grid, and that doesn't help either.
We did see last year that, like, just one example, the ESB, that they are getting the highest profits they've ever had. The most profits they have ever had in history.
They are, and there are, I suppose, questions to be asked there as to whether or not they have too much of an influence in the generation of power. We need to remember, though, is that the ESB and Electric Ireland are semi-state companies, so they do pay a dividend to the government, and then the government gets that money. So you could say that the government, should maybe be paying a little bit more that money out to people.
I mean, that's really interesting. So the government takes some of that money back, so why they're not taxed maybe as much?
Yeah, but I mean, it's semi-state, so a dividend is paid out. I think recently Electric Ireland or the ESB networks paid out a dividend of over 100 million. Now, obviously, there was that energy credit that got given out to people as well, so you could say the government was just paying back to people what people had already paid.
That's fascinating.
But there's a lot of reasons why prices here are high.
So when the government look like they're doing a wonderful thing by handing money back out to the people, it's actually maybe money profit coming back from the
some
energy.
of it.
Let's look at what's going on with Russia, because we're seeing obviously the EU is trying to limit the resources that they're taking from Russia. In Ireland, how much oil would we get directly from Russia?
We do get a huge amount of oil or gas directly from Russia, but as a whole, if we look at Europe, for example, around 40% of Europe's gas comes from Russia and around 30% of its oil. So that's a big, a lot of amount that you need to look for within a short space of time. So we don't have a huge exposure, but the problem is, though, is that then when Germany, when Poland, countries which do have a huge exposure, when they go then trying to look for new sources of gas, we're then competing with them. So it's more the indirect knock-on effect. effects. So whilst we mightn't be quite as badly impacted as some maybe Eastern European countries, it's going to be very, very difficult for us down the line. Usually trying to wean yourself off that much gas from one country can take years, whereas we're trying to do it in the space of basically a few months.
So what do we need to be doing? Because obviously we have got so many people competing for a smaller part of the cake now. You know, they all need to get that. So to future-proof us, what do we need to be doing? Who should we be looking towards?
I think if you look at countries such as Norway and Iceland, they're great countries which have invested hugely in renewable energy over the years, and that's definitely what we need to do. And then we obviously have those targets for 80% of our electricity to come from renewables by 2030. But what I'd be saying to viewers is that's not going to be cheap and that's not going to be easy. Personally, I don't think that 80% target will be met. I don't think the grid is going to be able to cope with it. And then there's also as well the whole issue around the storage of renewable electricity. The sun isn't always shining, the wind isn't always blowing. Storing electricity in huge batteries is really, really expensive, and the technology just isn't really quite there at the moment. So the transition towards renewable energy is going to be tough, but that is absolutely what we need to do.
But it's about the upfront investment now and reap the dividends later. I mean, we're seeing the climate action bill, what we're trying to hit by 2030 and 2050 again, we have to be seen to be putting the money in now. And listen, we're an island.
Yeah.
Renewables should be the way that this country should be looking.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have such huge untapped potential, particularly when it comes to offshore wind. Yeah. So our problem is that we've put a lot of our eggs in one basket in recent years. So onshore wind, land wind, but it's not always that windy on land. But now at least we're investing more in solar, although obviously in Ireland, solar isn't really going to provide enough electricity.
Why are they not going offshore then?
Again, it's a technology, it's getting the licence. I just don't think the government will has been there. As with the housing crisis, you see when you try to build things, there's objections. Now, I think there is licences being granted at the moment, and certainly the Green Party is trying to push towards it. But it's, you know, it's not going to be cheap. But I think offshore is definitely where we need to go.
They are, but there's environmental impact studies that need to be done about what's going on. It can't just be lash them in there and we destroy our seas.
Yeah, absolutely.
And obviously, then when we create all this energy, the data centres are going to take them all. So that's great. So I'm just wondering right now, if people are thinking about switching providers, one provider has left the market, is it worth it to look around?
Absolutely. It absolutely is worth it. So there's about maybe 11 or 12 providers remaining. I'm not surprised Iberdrola left, to be honest. I think the Irish market is probably a little bit oversubscribed. There's only around 2.2, 2.3 million households compared to maybe 30 or 40 million in the UK. We're a small market. We were never going to be able to take, I don't think, 13 or 14 suppliers. Okay. But there's still lots of choice. And what viewers need to remember is that all those suppliers are still pretty much competing aggressively for new business. And to get the new business, they're all offering big discounts of maybe 30, 40% for a year to entice people to switch.
So say you're in your house, right, and your partner is the main person on the electricity. Can we take their name off and put someone else's name on to get that discount? Like, can it go from the wife to the husband?
That would probably be maybe veering into fraud, so I won't answer that question. But you could always switch even mid-contract if you want, although you might be charged an early exit fee, but then it's usually only €50, so it's not a huge amount of money. But there was a recent study that was done by the CRU, which is the energy regulator, and they found out that around maybe 40% of people had never switched. So that's people who absolutely are overpaying for their energy.
Interesting stuff. I mean, every time we do one of these consumer bits, it's always really worthwhile to look to try and change your providers. Even I was reading your notes to say once in your lifetime you should change your mortgage as well. It's a big hassle, but it's worth it down the line. Listen, Daragh, we are unfortunately out of time, but thank you so much. Daragh Cassidy, consumer advisor, of course, from bonkers.ie. Thank you for
Absolutely. And if you've done it, like, what's going on? Are you thinking about switching? What's going on in your house at the minute with energy? 0896 111 111. Love to hear from you.
We'd love to hear from you. Now, up next, we're going to chat through the top stories making today's papers. Don't go away.